Okay, everybody, we just finished our read aloud Zoom, and much to Ellie's dismay, I stopped it and said I would finish reading chapter 2 and post it tomorrow. But I get to read it first, right away. Isn't that just the cruelest thing ever? Okay, so chapter 2, Aggie Morton, Mystery Queen. The Body Under the Piano. A flurry of preparations. Let me see if I can try to get into her way of speaking. She has a different way of phrasing things. I'm going to have to get better at it. I might have spent the week yearning for Saturday to come again, hoping for renewed acquaintance with Hector Perot. But first there was Friday to fret about. Miss Mary Ann was hosting a concert in the Mermaid Dance Room. The name of the evening and its intention was Befriend the Foreigners. I had written a poetical tribute that I was meant to read aloud. All week I wished that Friday evening should never arrive, or else should be over and done. And yet here I was, with an hour to go, spinning around and around on the piano stool. Miss Mary Ann had given firm instructions on how we should arrange the studio. I had already placed 6 sturdy crates along one side of the room, with Charlotte trailing close behind in case I stubbed a thumb or something. Our audience members this evening were to fill these containers with cast-off clothes and other useful items, later to be sorted and distributed to needy refugees and immigrants who had recently arrived here in Torquay. So Torquay. So we can look that up on a map and see whereabouts in England Torquay is. There seemed to be many reasons for people to travel far from home, some with only a small bundle of belongings. Several families had fled religious persecution or starvation in Russia, caused by the cruel neglect of their Tsar. A number of Belgians were here to avoid brewing turmoil under the bad King Leopold, and a few destitute Lascar seamen awaited berths on ships back home to India. I had never yet seen a refugee, but the town simmered with talk, if a person stood about in the right place to hear it. Shops were ideal for eavesdropping, or the church vestibule, and certainly our own kitchen at Groveland, where Cook and Sally gathered endless tidbits from tradesmen and servants from other households. It was generally discussed that visitors from other lands were frequently remiss in their bathing habits, and that they had wore clothing incompatible with our English sense of fashion. Some liked spicy food and considered bread pudding and haddock to be inedible. Haddock is a type of fish. And I, myself, was not enthralled by haddock. We perhaps shared a place to begin. Miss Aggie? Charlotte beckoned me over to assist in arranging chairs for the audience. When those were set, Miss Mary Ann provided festive clothes to drape over the piano and the piano stool. We put a plainer covering on the table where refreshments would be laid upon arrival from the Royal Victoria Hotel. The hotel had generously donated all the treats to be served, thanks to Florence Fusswell's father being the general manager. This was only one of the reasons that Florence Fusswell thought she was queen of the evening. Another was her abundant yellow hair and pink skin, and what she herself referred to as her rosebud lips. She busied herself straightening the chairs that Charlotte and I had already set out in perfectly tidy rows. Lavinia Payne, best friend and loyal follower of Florence Fusswell, stood next to the mirror, counting as she touched her fingertips to her toes 15 times. Her dark plaits, means braids, dangled and swayed like 2 scrawny cows' tails switching flies away. So she was thinking about a little girl's braids looking like a cow's tail as she flung her head. I returned to the piano stool and began again to swivel. A large ladleful of my confidence drained away in the presence of girls so certain of themselves. I was perfectly able to utter my own opinion at home with my family or any of the servants, or with intriguing foreign boys in sweet shops. But these prattling girls my own age made my words dry up. It was not the same as being shy with adults. I simply did not have a knack for silly chatter. I wished to know what people chose not to say aloud, what dark secrets simmered, and what might happen next. I sometimes took a certain pleasure in imagining misfortunes that might rain down upon Lavinia Payne or Florence Fusswell. I stopped spinning. What if the chair Florence was lifting at this moment were to fall and crush her toe? Oh, would there be a gush of blood? Or might it be better that she suffer a clean fracture? Oh, the story possibilities flowered before me. Yes, to begin a tale horror, I'd use a broken bone. The injured girl howled as her foot swelled and throbbed. She was driven in a rickety and bouncy cart to the Torquay hospital, where the surgeon declared that the toe, no, the foot, must be cut off. Incoherent with distress, Florence begged for mercy. As the surgeon lifted his knife, a nurse helped the trembling girl to escape. The unnecessary amputation of an extremity seemed a bit cruel, even in a fiction created for revenge. But the nurse, whose name was Ethelwyn Smirk, revealed a dark intent. After forcing Florence to hobble, despite her injury, down 2 flights of crumbling stairs, Nurse Smirk imprisoned the sobbing girl in a cellar inhabited by a great number of hairy gray spiders, more than 30, who had grown rather bigger than usual due to their consumption of the rank and oily substance dripping from the rusted pipe that runs along the ceiling. Shrill laughter interrupted my pleasant daydream. She called that a pleasant daydream. So she's sitting here trying to think of ways in which that her nemesis here, Florence Fusswell, could get hurt. Shrill laughter interrupted. Y'all do that? Y'all sit in class and have all these daydreams of, how could we make Miss Bouse make a fool of herself today? No need. I do that on my own. Florence and Lavinia were falling over themselves to assist a young man edging his way through the door. He hauled in one large floral bouquet and then another and set down the ornate vases on either side of the piano. He tugged off his cap to reveal a mop of chestnut hair and dark eyes. Girls like Florence and Lavinia would not normally deign to look at a delivery boy. But this was Leonard. Remember, she talked about Leonard earlier, didn't she? Especially handsome and almost 18. As he was employed by my mother, the prestige of knowing him was rather more mine than theirs, was it not? He slept in the groundskeeper's shed at Groveland in exchange for helping in the garden and the hothouse. I saw him every day. So let Florence and Lavinia try to ship the heavy pots into the most suitable position. What did I care? Miss Mary Ann soon stepped in to scold them away. Please allow the young man to perform his task. There are 55 programs, my dears. I hope you can trust you to fold them precisely. Hello, Leonard, I said. Miss Agatha! Your arrangements are lovely. Yes, miss, from your own greenhouse, pretty as anything. The Groveland gardens, neglected since Papa's death, had quite revived under Leonard's care this past summer. He'd assembled the bouquets for my sister Marjorie's wedding last month, only weeks after he'd arrived in Torquay and moved into the shed behind the kitchen vegetable plot. So she has an older sister that's gotten married. Let's log that away. All for a good cause, eh, miss? You've got a soft heart for creatures in need, haven't you? Animals and humans? Oh, we all do. Florence had crept closer again. That's why we're here, isn't it, Lavinia? Very soft hearts we've got. Lavinia clutched a sheath of programs and nodded in ardent agreement. No one's softer, she said. Soft in the head, I thought. How easily they peeved me. Leonard smiled as if he'd read my thoughts. We're dancing tonight, said Florence. She pushed a program into his hand and pointed. A Graceful Moment, music by Frédéric Chopin, interpretation by Miss Marianne Eversham, movement by Florence Fusswell and Lavinia Payne. Florence whispered, Maybe he can't read. Lavinia ignored her. My name is only second because the listing is alphabetical, she said. But Leonard's finger had moved down the page. And you, Miss Agatha? You're saying a poem? A shiver tingled up my neck. I got this far in the day by avoiding thoughts of what was coming at the end of it. A recitation that waited like a jowled monster to gobble me up. I managed a bit of a nod and stared hard at Leonard's scuffed boots. One of his laces had been broken and reknotted in at least 3 places. She's the one who wrote the verse, said Florence. It's not by a real poet, not Tennyson or anyone. That makes it better then, doesn't it? Said Leonard. Writ special for these new strangers come to town? Oh, my heart about burst with gratitude. I glanced up to bestow an appreciative smile, but he was turning to nod to Miss Mary Ann. You'll be back in the morning, Mr. Cable, said Miss Mary Ann, to collect these up again? Leonard nodded. If you're sure, ma'am, that you don't want to keep them till the flowers aren't so fresh. Miss Mary Ann smiled at him. You're a kind lad to offer, but no. Return them to Mrs. Morton. We need to dance in here." Leonard slid his cap back on and touched his brim in a salute. The door opened as he reached it, and all at once the entrance was congested with quite a crowd. Rose Eversham was first, with her mother a step behind. The Evershams lived next door to Mummy and me in a villa named Evermore. Wasn't that a divine name for a house? Miss Marianne lived there too, being Rose's aunt, and with no family of her own. Following the ladies was Florence's brother, Mr. Roddy Fusswell, from the Royal Victoria Hotel, holding aloft an enormous platter of macaroons and tiny fruit tarts. On his head was a gray top hat. His hands were sheathed in yellow leather gloves. He wore a frock coat and billowy cravat, as if our recital was occurring at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and not above a shop on Union Street. His two assistants each carried a plate of dainty sandwiches. A chittering hum started up, all of us thrumming with excitement to be near Rose Eversham, starring subject of gossip flying about town this past week. Stories claimed that she'd been seen in the company of more than one young man at the roller rink, on the pier, laughing and twirling about without a care who noticed. Further whispers said that her mother had scolded her sharply on the high street, only to have Rose turn and walk away, as rude as can be. One of the young men was Roddy Fusswell, or Roddy, I think it's Roddy Fusswell. Another was Charlie Trotter, the butcher's son. Rose had also been seen kissing a sailor, but it was Lavinia who made that claim, so we could safely dismiss that. So she was making that lie up. And here she was, sailing through the door like a queen on the prow of a ship. Leonard ducked his head as if caught in a glaring beam of light. He slid to one side, allowing the parade to enter. Rose waved at Miss Marianne. "Darling Auntie M, you see, not a minute past 5 o'clock. I vowed not to be late, and I'm as good as my word, and with Mother." Had her eyes performed the slightest of roles? And was that an answering flicker in Miss Marianne's? It seemed there was a conspiracy of niece and aunt. Everyone knew Rose's mother to be a trial. Our maid, Sally, called Mrs. Eversham a prickly old cow. Though we were neighbors, I rarely had the opportunity to examine her so closely as this. Mrs. Irma Eversham had the grace of a face of a grumpy dog. That's not a good look to have, is it? She paused on the threshold, looking about as if she'd caught a whiff of something rotten. Roddy Fusswell, holding his tray of treats, was only a half a step behind. He now met her back with a thunk. For a terrible moment, the pastries threatened to shower down upon her head, as he was tall and she was squat. But Mr. Fusswell managed an agile twist and kept the tray aloft. A solitary jam tart slid over the rim and landed on the crown of Miss Irma Eversham's hat. Rose and Miss Marianne both lunged forward to offer aid. Roddy Fusswell plucked at the tart from above, knocking Leonard's shoulder with his elbow. Mrs. Eversham became a spitting cat, turning her head so abruptly that the tart flew off and was nimbly caught by Miss Marianne. "Keep away from me!" Mrs. Eversham shook off all assistance. Miss Marianne stepped back, pressing Leonard into the doorframe. Roddy Fusswell hovered too closely, but could not move in the knot of people. Mrs. Eversham's indignation made the room vibrate. "And furthermore," she said, "keep away from my daughter." "Mother!" Rose switched her valet from one hand to the other, making a great show of its content being heavy. "Let us think about the needy," she said quickly and loudly. "I've gone through my wardrobe and had a good clean out. I shall have to order new things very soon unless you want to see my unmentionables." "Rose!" scolded Mrs. Eversham. "Such brazen talk!" So she basically was saying if she doesn't buy her new clothes, she's giving all of her clothes away to the needy people, because now her parents will have to buy her all new clothes. And if they don't buy her new clothes, then she's going to walk around in her underwear. That's what she just said, her unmentionables. "Will you come and sit down, Mrs. Eversham?" Charlotte's calm voice and steady hand reached through the mayhem. "We have reserved you a place here in the front row." "Yes, Mother, please sit," said Rose. "I will make you a cup of tea and a biscuit. You love a sugary biscuit?" "I will not sit," said Mrs. Eversham, and I will not stay. I do not want to be here, and the present company confirms that. Do not fuss, Rose. I am certainly get my own self home. Rose made no further effort to convince a change of mind. Lavinia stifled a giggle. Leonard had been creeping toward the exit, but froze when Mrs. Eversham turned to leave. I slid behind Charlotte as Roddy Fusswell put his platter down and offered to escort Mrs. Eversham to the street. She refused with a brusque flap of her hand as if he were a hornet. He put a hand under her elbow, and again she swatted him. This time he retreated, treading on poor Leonard's toe. Mrs. Eversham continued calling even as she descended the stairs. I'll see to it that any young man who approaches my daughter will be imprisoned on a charge of attempting to assault her. Does everyone hear me? I was not the only person waiting to exhale when we heard the door below slam shut. Whew, my palms itched to applaud. It had been 10 minutes of jolly good theater, better than a Christmas pantomime. A flimmy noise in Roddy Fusswell's throat set the room back in motion. Leonard finally made his exit, though I imagine that he opened the street door with great caution in case Mrs. Eversham had not yet trundled off. Rose lifted the lid of her valet and dumped the contents into one of the crates. How do you bear it, Rose? Asked Roddy. She is insufferable. She should not be tolerated a single day longer. Well, life would certainly be smoother, said Miss Mary Ann, if she were not in Torquay. Sadly true, said Rose. At least once a day I find myself wishing that she were dead. Oh, I think that's foreshadow. We know they're going to find a dead body sometime, right? And I think poor Mrs. Eversham might end up being our dead body. What do you think? They've made her out to be a mean person. So now we know that Roddy and Miss Mary Ann and Rose don't like her. And she wasn't really very nice to Leonard, although she didn't really talk to him, but he wasn't very nice. There's like 3 people that don't like her. And her daughter says that at least once a day she wishes she were dead. So when we read chapter 3, A Delightful Evening, which I am not going to read right now, we will have to see. I wonder if the dead body appears yet. Oh, let's go back and look at the pictures because we met a lot of people. Ooh, yeah, we met a lot of these people now. Okay, so we've already seen Aggie and Hector Perot. And that's Granny Jane. That must be Aggie's granny. That's Mummy. That's the mom. Over here, we haven't met Tony or Augustus Libley yet, but there's Charlotte, the nanny, the babysitter, the constable, Beck. I'll always remember that name, won't I? Here's the mean Irma Eversham. And this is the dance teacher, Mary Ann Eversham, her sister. Rose Eversham is the daughter, aunt, niece, mother, daughter. Roderick Fusswell, which Roddy. And there's Florence Fusswell. Ooh, Lavinia Payne. And the 2 people we haven't met yet. Oh, we have met Leonard Cable. That's the young boy everybody thinks is cute. The only one we haven't met is Inspector. Is it Locke? Yeah, Inspector Locke. So, we've almost met everyone. All right, guys. See you later.